Hi, I'm Ann Lewis, and I write stuff. Um, yeah, so I've already introduced myself several times, so you don't need to know who I am. This panel is about religion in world building. So when a writer builds a world and actually will create a religion for it, now some do it overtly, some do not. And so we're going to talk a little bit, I think, about that on this panel. Why don't we go ahead and really quickly introduce yourselves if you've not yet been on a panel and tell us a little bit about yourself. So we start at the end there.
I've already been on a panel.
You've already been on a panel, so everybody knows you. Okay.
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
So, hi everybody. I'm Patrick Abbott, author of the books Fallen and Risen, and I took my experiences and that of friends being embedded with military units in Iraq and Afghanistan with Shia Muslims, Zaydis, and even a few Zoroastrians, and use that in the book.
I'll reintroduce myself. I'm Sarah Pierzchala. I write under S. Kirk Pierzchala. My current series, Beyond Cascadia, I'm kind of fortunate because it's set just a few years in the future, so I can use recognizable religions and conflicts between them. But I'm also kind of projecting and including some invented things, like a mushroom cult and sort of an AI-generated New Age synthesis philosophy thing that they all work into the stories and how the characters kind of have to react and live under that.
I'm Carl Gallagher, and I've been up here before.
I'm Rachel Fulton Brown, and you've heard me a lot this morning. I write only with a Christian theology, but trying to figure out how to make that story work. So,
Cool. So how does an author's own religion affect their world building? It's a question I have. I'm Catholic, so I tend to, I want to have a liturgical sense in my books in terms of, where, when I write a religion in my characters in the current series I'm doing, they are based on, and everybody's like, oh, Nephilim again. No, I try to do something very different with the Nephilim in mine and kind of tie them into the original fall of Adam and Eve and what the result of an extra curse being placed upon this people that to take upon themselves and what that causes to happen to them. And it's kind of reflective of our how sin affects us in our daily life. So they actually have a liturgical religion that my friend said they're almost kind of they're like Noahide-ish Jewish in space. And so they are they actually have an interaction with God that is very different than ours because of this the nature of themselves, that they got an extra curse on themselves. They were fallen to start with the original fall, and then they had another fruit from the garden, and that causes them to be have a even more of a fallen nature than we do. So it's what happens to them. So it's kind of so that when they actually have, how Adam could talk to people in the garden and talk to God, literally walk with God, they could almost do that. They hear God, they can actually speak to him. So they know he's real. There's no question about it. There's no atheists among them. So but what does it mean when they fall? So that's what it's all about. So my question is, how does my religion affect, or how does your religion affect the way you insert religion into your books? And we're going to start down there with Herman. You can go ahead and talk about your own personal faith and maybe how you've that somehow, or how it's affected your world building.
Well, when I originally started writing fantasy, and this is back like around 2006, the first story that I wrote, I made a decision whether I was going to include my religious beliefs in it or not, because I'm a big fan of Tolkien. And I decided at that time to not, and probably just as well because the book sucked and it, got rejected like about 80 times. So when I came back, I had that same debate with myself again. And I decided that, everything that I believe, I should somehow inject that into the story, because really when a person's reading a story, they're kind of reading something about the author. A part of the author is in the story. And if I omit that type of, if I omit my sort of worldview, especially as it relates to religion, I would basically be lying to my readers. So the decision was made that I should do that. And then as I began to think about it, how I can incorporate elements, I found that including the religious aspects of what I believe, maybe not exactly what I believe, but the various elements, I could take pieces out and kind of write stories around them. I found that it gave the writing a lot of gravitas, a lot of weight and depth. And I really enjoyed that, and especially, in those little instances where you could add like maybe a couple paragraphs that really sort of highlight maybe a moral teaching or a moral thought or a question that needs to be posed to the reader, to give them something to think about maybe after they're done reading. So I found that not only am I being true to myself and am I being true to the reader, but I'm also allowing people to sort of think about these things even after they're done with the book. Does that answer the question?
No,
Okay.
that's good.
Rock on.
So with me, one of the best discussions I've ever had with several fans of my book is whether or not it's a Christian book. And it's really nice that both atheists and I would say just general nuns and Christians can both enjoy the book and take their own meaning out of it. My own religion, Catholicism, I implement into the book in the sense that it's cosmologically true. It's not a preaching book. It deals with the main character and the struggle with faith as he's going through all these events. But also I took kind of inspiration from the Israelites' relationships with their sort of kin, of the Ishmaelites, the Edomites, and then the Samaritans. And that the Sabia, the aliens, they come to Earth and it's like, oh, this is our home. Oh my gosh, we have illegitimate half-brothers here. And it's their own experience of being the supremacist and meeting other people. And for me, it was just my interactions with especially Muslims in Afghanistan. It was, oh my gosh, you really have all the old prophets too? And I would talk to them, you have the archangels too? And it was just exchanging stories. And it was, where did you get that idea? Or how does this actually relate? Because what you say in some areas is true, and we can't deny that, same with me. But in other areas, we just disagree. So that was a lot of inspiration.
So I'm Catholic also, and when I resumed writing after many decades hiatus, once the kids had settled down to the point where I could concentrate, I take my responsibility as a sub-creator based on Tolkien's philosophy seriously. So, and also since this is most of my stories take place in the world where we live, it's going to reflect my Catholic worldview, but largely through, as much as possible, the natural law and consequences for behavior and things like that. And I will have some religious discussions between different viewpoints. On a technical level, I found myself at times when I was plotting out, like picking if I was going to refer to a certain time of year, if the story takes place like near Christmas. Okay, is that going to be Catholic Christmas or the Orthodox Christmas? Because one of the characters is Orthodox. So I actually would go to timeanddate.com and type in the year in the future and look at the date and work from that. And then after a while, I realized nobody's going to care. That's way too much detail. That's not the kind of religion we need in here. So for most of the series, it's basically good versus evil and original sin and grace and things like that, with as few sermons as possible, except for book 3, which your term, the liturgical aspect, that was one where I was also putting in a lot, trying to I wanted the arc of that particular story to kind of reflect the different parts of the Catholic Mass and have it tied in with the main time scale for the story. So I was really going down some weird weeds, rabbit holes, and then realized as I'm overthinking it, just kind of let the grace go through with different kinds of symbolism. It doesn't have to track that closely. And again, nobody's going to care. But so for a real world setting, even if it's in the future, it's going to be, you're going to have some Christian discussions in there. So the characters do have discussions of like atheism versus faith and so forth. So I didn't have to make up too much for that one.
My religious journey has been a bit more eclectic. Started out Catholic, had my rabid atheist phase, became a neo-pagan, then went to Unitarian, and am now a mainline Protestant, which is certainly less stressful than some of the other options. I do draw on this for my stories. I am mostly a science fiction writer, and unlike some science fiction universes, my characters, at least many of them, have religions, practice their religions. Even the less devout ones will draw upon religion for weddings and funerals and other stressful occasions. I have my Portal fantasy novel begins with a neo-pagan ceremony being hijacked by a magical spell to suck all these people into the other universe. And is later on bookended by a Christian pastor drawing on Jesus's least of us speech to chastise the leadership of the group, which involved being on the Bible website. Which translation do I want to use for this? Because there's so many options. And then looking in my far future space opera, where there's this history erasing government. How do people practice their religion when they're not allowed to own the book? And so Christianity becomes the oral tradition of the sacrificed God. And Jews save their religion by disappearing themselves completely into an undersea hideout. And there is this discussion in the latest book of some Jews and Christians talking, well, the Christians turned the other cheek and the Jews found a way to survive. Why haven't we met any Muslims? And someone says, because the Muslims were going to fight, and leaving the implication that the empire probably wiped them out. And that is something still a bit open-ended in the story universe, which is going on. So, I'm not really drawing on it for the magical aspect, since I don't have that much magical aspect in my stories, but it's certainly something that the people consider part of themselves, and I expect that to continue into the future.
So in the stories that we've been writing in Dragon Common Room, they're explicitly Christian, but the point is to, I guess it's not to show people practicing the religion, but to show the truth of the story that we are, as like in our real world, meant to believe. My problem is I realize it's catechism generally, which is how do you show people the truth of the story that you're in. Aurora Borealis is, more properly speaking, an animal allegory, that the animals have, they have a journey, there's symbolism in it, there's, representations of appropriate worship, and you're trying to bring them to from inappropriate or incomplete worship to complete worship of Christ. We hope that we've written it in a way that you have that kind of fairy tale turn that Tolkien's describing, that it's the aha in the moment of, oh, this is the story that we're in. Now, this is dangerous, right? Because you end up in the Narnia problem, which is people like the story, they're in the story, they get to the point where you do the big reveal and Aslan is Christ and everybody's mad at you. So we do try to put it up front in Aurora Borealis with the quotation from Corinthians, but hopefully to the point where you can say, this is the mystery that we are participating in, and you are now joyous at that revelation. With Draco Alchemicus, it's for adults instead of for children, and therefore it deals much more. I mean, there's sin in Aurora Borealis, and the seals are mean to the panda and stuff like that. But it's more at children's play level of sinfulness, whereas in Draco Alchemicus, what we're trying to show is how. I mean, it's like a theological mystery. How does Christ do it with the incarnation? How does he enter into the sinful swirlingness of our bargain with the devil and break it? So it's not, we're in the sense that we're not really world building, we're trying to show the mystery of the world that we actually inhabit, but it's going to end up feeling like it's all mythological, mysteriousness. And that is also our point. It's like the Chestertonian flip to say, you're in this story and it's as weird as we just tried to show you.
Interesting. Now, there are, of course, popular science fiction where, religion is part of the story, or appears in it. Like I think, of course, Babylon 5, where you have it's kind of a incongruity between Star Trek and Babylon 5. If you think Star Trek, religion's been wiped away, essentially. You don't have it anywhere. It doesn't exist on Earth anymore. Meanwhile, Babylon 5, you still see monks running around, and they prove to be very useful. And you still have people who believe things, who have faith. You have Protestant preachers. You have, like I said, the Catholic monks, and so you have. It's not gone. People are still going to keep believing, even into the future. They're going to have this religious thing, and I thought that made the Babylon 5 universe made more real to me. As someone who was watching that series, it's like, well, at least he's given that. And, Michael J. Straczynski is an atheist. So the fact that he acknowledged, hey, people are not going to just stop believing things just because we're in the future. So to me, it adds kind of a sense of flavor to the story. It makes it more real to me. And I think that if you have a culture that has a religion, it's okay to show that. Would you say that that's if you're building a new universe or building a story, would you say that having religion as part of it gives it much more punch or much more realism to the reader? I'm sorry.
Well, in Aurora Borealis, it's the penguins. I'm going with they're not murderous as far as we know. The meta question that I hear when you're asking that is, what do we do with worship?
Yes.
And you're setting up saying in Star Trek they worship nothing.
Right.
And in Babylon 5 there's still a recognition that there is an impulse to, I say I only think theologically from one direction. There's a creator and we should worship him.
And yet in original Star Trek, just to point one out, I don't know if you guys remember this, but in one episode, I can't remember what episode it was, it starts out with a couple being married in a chapel on the Enterprise.
Balance of Terror.
Balance of Terror. Thank you very much. I knew it was a really good episode, not one. But anyway, go ahead. And I thought that was really wild. So why do they have a chapel if they are, don't have religion? But anyway, incongruity. Continue.
Well, so people, and people tend to think of religion as practices, right? Do they pray? Do they worship? Do they have sacrifices? I ground everything I do in Tolkien's effort that you are, because he always said, I'm writing it that is a world that the mind who believes in the Trinity could find appropriate. With our penguins, they live in the ice city on the mountain, and they have a cult practice of carrying a statue of the orca, who's the representation of Our Lady in the story. And they have, an altarpiece that shows, the polar bears and the other animals bowing down to the griffin, and they have the altar and they have the sacrifices and stuff. And our point is kind of, they got all the forms appropriate, but then the griffin shows up and grabs the panda, and you realize that there is also this mystical element of the literally rapture, because he raptures the panda. That my problem as a historian of Christianity and as someone who's trying to show the way into the the faith as well as showing how people have practiced it, is we're always dealing with the outside form and the interior experience. And that is what we've been trying to do in the poetry and the allegory, is do what Lewis admittedly wanted to do, which was show you can look at these things from the outside, but you can also look at them from the inside. And so I see it as the inside outside problem. Are you trying to show what worship feels like from within, or what it looks like from the outside? And we're trying to show it from the within of the story.
I do find that having religion in the story brings readers in more. It gives them more connection. I have had people talk to me about my stories that, there's, a plot arc where, Earth has been, depopulated by, evil artificial intelligences, but our heroes are hired to take some pilgrims to Earth who want to go there. And this includes a couple of rabbis wanting to go to Jerusalem, at the end of their lives, and a Muslim family wanting to make the Hajj. Because, even if we have been driven off from Earth, people are still going to have those beliefs. And then you have some of the, more pragmatic parts of it where, there's, in the space opera, there's the planet isolated from the evil empire, which still has its Bibles because they haven't, the censor hasn't come yet to erase their Bibles. So you have this group of Christian churches, discovering, recontacting the world. There's other Christians. Oh, Earth has been destroyed, and this one priest, makes the comment on the organization going on. Everybody is a Catholic when he thinks he has a chance to be Pope. Okay, to explain that, the world that retained the Bible versus the oral tradition Christians, early on in the contact, there is a riot because the oral tradition people are worshiping Harold. God's name is everything. Our Father, hallowed be thy name.
Yes.
Oh, I know.
Because that's the kind of drift you get in an oral tradition. And so that was something that, made a memorable stuff. And I remember something else we were coming early on. I had a list of children's toys, which included a Story of Hanukkah book. And it's like, ooh, Jews exist in this setting, which I grant there's probably a lot of science fiction where it's implied that there aren't any. So yeah, I can certainly see people responding to that.
Right. So including religion, I think, lends an air of, if nothing else, familiarity, because you've got that continuity. Like what Anne was saying about how Babylon 5 was like a much more recognizable type of world. So that's one aspect. Even just that little bit of flavor, and then, like you said, the wedding. And was it Star Trek: The Next Generation?
No, it was the original Star Trek,
Was
Balance
it?
of Terror. Yes.
I don't remember a wedding scene in that.
Yeah, it was at the
It
very,
was-
very beginning of
But-
the episode. In fact, it's
Okay.
the very first scene of Balance of Terror, and yeah, I think the guy
But do
gets
you
knocked off, doesn't
remember the episode where they visit a planet that the Roman Empire was
Yeah.
still high tech, and Uhura goes, "Oh, they're saying the sun."
he? The
Yeah.
sun,
Yeah.
yes.
But
yeah.
that was like the only other time they really,
Red circuses.
yeah. So that was
But they,
it was kind of
part of the this is something that they had not locked down the the rules of the setting yet. So particularly
It
first
became more
season.
firm in Next Generation, certainly.
yeah. So for me, it's a much more integral part of the story, and so I have a protagonist. One protagonist starts out like a nun, None, sort of an agnostic. And over the course of the story, the series, enough things happen. There's enough other witnesses to, I would say, the truth in his life that plus he undergoes an experience that makes him realize, oh yeah, there is something out there, but he's still not really interested in joining a formal religion. And then you have another character who was raised in a pseudo, maybe Catholic setting, and then fell away, had a wild life, and then had an epiphany and decides to become a priest. So that's a big part of book 3. Part of it takes place in the seminary. So that's obviously important. It's there, and it's not that far in the future. And it's not just for flavor. And so trying to show grace working in different settings without resorting to a lot of sermons is a challenge. And then I've got these other subplots, and again, involving new and upcoming religions and how they are affecting the culture and individuals. So these sort of the AI generated new age pastiche is the one that's promoted by the totalitarian government in order to supplant the need to worship in the populace. So that's one that I sort of invented, and it wasn't that hard actually, because it's just sort of mush. But there's enough. One of the other characters is speculating. Actually, this is in the work in progress. This is currently at my editor, and one of the characters is speculating: is there enough truth even in the AI generated thing, which took real religions and filtered stuff out and just came up with this like platitudes? Is there enough truth in there to even have a good effect on people? And the idea is that, well, yeah, truth is powerful enough that it's going to come through.
For me, having religion in stories allows for much greater complexity, characters, and story itself. And especially if you think about religion as man's relationship with the cosmos creator, it comes naturally. The main character, he's invested much of his life in trying to build up what he would consider a normal American life, and through family incidents and military incidents, he's lost it all. And as he struggles to recover from his PTSD, he more and more realizes he has to go back to the very beginning of his beliefs and sources. And that struggle would be impossible without religion. It'd be more just, I need a bigger house. With the aliens themselves, it allows for them as individuals to figure out what does it mean that Earth has people with a different relationship with the Creator, and how do they interact with that? How does that complicate their plans? And then as individuals on both sides, we found intelligent life that apparently has a soul. How do we interact? How do we relate? What does this mean for me? It's a struggle because nobody's perfect in their religion, so you also have the struggle between what they state they believe and what they can actually practice.
Well, I kind of already answered first part of the question with my first thing, so it kind of sucks when I answer the question before we even get to it.
Sorry.
It's my life, man. Anyways, what I will say though is that I think religion, I think incorporating religion, specifically Christianity, into my works allows me. Well, let me back up a little bit. Basically, what I've done with the stuff that I'm working on right now is to take what is normally in the spiritual realm and literally place it right in the material. And so it allows me, not only does it allow me to bring those elements and the various pieces of the things that we believe along with it and sort of show them and dissect them and discuss them, it also allows me to dovetail into other things that wouldn't normally seem like it would fit. Like one of the things I really love is Lovecraft, and I bring a lot of Lovecraftian elements in there, but I'm also able to tie them into things that are within our religion. Because when you get into some of the specifics of the Bibles, especially when you start moving out of the material realm, you get some really weird, whacked out stuff, and that literally sort of dovetails with that sort of Lovecraftian, weird fiction type thing. And then it allows me to explore things like the nature of evil, the sometimes how seductive it is. So do creatures that are created have souls? What is their inevitable fate? The use of where power comes from, whether it's granted on high or whether it's extracted from another source. So it allows me to kind of explore a lot of topics, and provide some very entertaining stuff, while at the same time giving people something to sort of think about. And hopefully I don't do anything that's going to get me condemned by my pastor and kicked out of church.
One thing it can certainly do is create a lot of drama, and it can create conflict also. I mean, you could have more than one religious faith kind of, they bash into each other at different points. So it's really, it can create that, in my opinion, having some sort of faith realm within your universe certainly can create more dramatic moments. When you have characters that believe differently. I have one friend who writes, she created a religious order of nuns who do rescue missions in space. And in one of the stories is, it's really fantastic, where she has several different, of course, you have the religious sisters who are based in Catholic faith, and they have a saint that has been named to rescue people in space. They're actually running this rescue mission, and another guy who is not, he's virulently, I can't remember if I think he was atheist, and he just caused a lot of problems for them, and ultimately they ended up coming to understand each other, and it was really well done. So having that dramatic, and of course they're all kind of in a very tense situation because you're in space, and and things, you don't have air outside, and there's all sorts of wonderful. So is it really cool? It was still a science fiction story, which was not fantasy. It was really well done. So I think it adds that sense of tension. Also, the internal conflict with one's faith is a certain cool dramatic adding. Now we're at a point. I know we got, let's see, 11:50 is kind of when we're supposed to end. We have about 4 minutes for that. We can take a little bit more time because we're going into lunch, but I don't want to take too much time because we don't want to be late for lunch. Do we have any questions out there that we can take? Go back in the back. Okay, give an example if you guys have one of a religion that was made up, that was done really well, right? So if a religion that someone added that was done really well. Can anyone? Why don't you start with her? Oh, you want to start? Go ahead.
Dune.
Dune. Oh yes, yeah. I thought he did a very nice job with Dune, especially with the Fremen. Yes, absolutely.
On the fantasy side, Lois Bujold's Chalion stories, which has sometimes called the Five Gods setting, because it's interesting. Not only is there real world affecting impacts from these gods, but there's also a different faith which follows a subset of the gods, and it's just as real for them. So you still have this conflict despite having real world evidence of the gods' existence.
Yeah, Dune's a good answer, but I'd also say maybe the Book of the New Sun, the Earth of the New Sun, which I've only recently discovered them and tore through those. There's 5, and I'm still coming to terms with what? What did you just do here? But there's a very strong religious sense to it, without detailing any kind of rituals. Or it's just it's very rich, and it's very, I'm just a believer, I guess. But yeah, it was just very remarkable.
So since Dune's already taken, one thing that I thought was done well in C.S. Lewis's Out of Silent Planet trilogy.
Oh, I love that.
It was the relation, and I would say religion, of on various planets. What would it be like to not have a fall? What would religion be like without any sacrificial priesthood or anything like that? And then you have the sequels of basically before the fall. Then you have demons on Earth. And it's just an interesting dynamic, especially if you think about possibility of alien life. Would they be fallen? Would God reach out to them? Would God not reach out to them? Would they be separate rules? Would they be basically Noahide Jews? Or would the Israeli Space Agency basically find space Samaritans? I mean, what would happen? So,
Yeah, I love
C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis. Yeah, because what I'm working on right now is influenced a little bit by him. I think what he did was really fantastic.
I was thinking more along the lines of George R. R. Martin's Old Gods, which kind of take off from the Lovecraftian stuff, but the inclusion of the weirwood and a lot of the pagan practices I thought was very interesting. The other one was the religion of, and now I'm drawing a complete blank, but it was the invaders in Narnia, and they took to the yeah, Calamari, something like
Colorman.
yeah,
Colorman,
and the religion of the vulture-headed god.
Tash.
I kind of want to say trash, but yeah, that one I thought was very well done because it was sort of, if I remember correctly, it was sort of kind of slipped in there, and then it comes kind of full circle in the last, and technically the last book of Narnia, with the final ending of the world.
And it's
So-
really freaky when it does.
Yeah,
It
and
was
once
pretty
again,
freaky.
Lovecraft, and I'm weird.
Any other questions? Okay. Whoops, we got you over there and over there. I'm going to take you real quick because I saw your hand before. Jack Chick. Yeah. Okay. How do you avoid being so heavy-handed? It's to be gentle. Just have it come when you write from a sense of genuine love and charity, and I think you kind of don't make it so overt. You know, you just tell a good story. I think if you make yourself tell a good story first, and the thematic values come through. It's the idea of fairy tales where you know the whole what is the truth, and the truth is what is incarnational, and if you can tell a good story that is through the truth and not get preachy, you're going to be great. So I think that's what you know that's how you can.
I am writing to show my characters' beliefs. I am not trying to change the reader's beliefs.
Right.
I am. And no, I was making notes about this. I think that there's religion and world building, there's the inside outside problem.
Yes.
Most of the time people thinking in anthropology of religion questions. It's like, how do you show what religion is? And what we're trying to do in our stories is have you have that moment of aha, which Tolkien pulled it off, right? And it's that moment when you burst into tears and have that glimpse of the reality. Tolkien did it.
Yeah, I try to show truth as much as I can, and through the sense of charity. And charity in this, I mean in the caritas. I mean, I'm not, you know, when I say love, people go, oh yeah, whatever. No, I'm serious. I when I tell a story, I'm telling it out of charity and out of in hope that there's light and grace that comes to you in some form through my storytelling. And so that's, you know, that's kind of where I come from at. I hope that makes sense. Did you have a question? Or did anybody else want to answer the question?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Number one, always let the character be true to themselves.
Yes. I agree.
You know, don't let the character do the talking about the things, and don't try and shove it into the narrative. Secondly, you know, if you do it right, your faith will speak for itself. You don't have to force it in there, especially if you do it right, letting whatever characters you have representing whatever talk for you. So be subtle, and don't put it into the narrative, put it into the characters. My opinion.
Go ahead. You think you'll be last one? Okay, I got to think about that one. Who wants to take it?
I'll take
I know.
The first thing is to set up an incident where maybe a character does something that would be unusual to everybody else. And then when they question him on it, have him explain the reason why. And I have a prime example in my third book where there's a bunch of dead people on the ground that got killed, and these were bad guys, and they're coming to abduct people and hurt people. And the character himself kneels and prays. He gets up, and everybody around him is looking at him like he's nuts, like, why are you praying for these people? And then he goes into an explanation of how people move into evil, and there are three ways, and I'm not going to go into details of that. But one of them is where somebody is expecting justice and never receives it, and because of that unfulfilled need for justice, they end up doing dark things. So they're led down there through an injustice done to them. And he goes and he asks, of these four men, which one of led them in, which one of these things led them into evil? Because even in decent people, there is a need for justice, and that somehow gets perverted. And the question goes unanswered, because I don't want to answer the question. I want the reader to answer the question and give them something to think about.
So I would say show somebody struggling with their faith. For instance, there's an example in Fallen where the main character is at an alien New Year's ceremony, and it's basically a group confession time. And some people are able to let it go, what happened, and other people involuntarily go against the faith and just can't let go of the pain that they've experienced. And that allows for conversation, or at least exploration of just the meaning of it, the purpose of everything, how it affects other characters.
Yeah, I would just second that, because even if you're like making up, ritual, how the character's belief system and how they interact with the world is really going to affect them. So it's like setting up an incident and allowing somebody to be tested or questioned, I think would make it seem more real.
Yeah, I think kind of what we're all saying here is you need to have some conflict about the religion to show it contrasting to something else. And I think my approach would be to have some kind of heresy, either an individual heretic or that there's some society you're reacting against, to have something to contrast that religion against.
So the you asked about depth. One, yes, the conflict, because that's what Tolkien said. The Lord of the Rings was all about the conflict over right worship. So that's the choice there. Depth, if you want to have them feel that there's a world outside, it's singing. You have that Tolkien. Look at Tolkien's book on the poetry that he wrote. In the Lord of the Rings, the depth comes from all the poems. It's in the songs that they sing, and the primary example is when Frodo hears Bilbo singing the Song of Arendelle. That's when he's wrapped out into that story.
I like the idea of singing. That's cool. Definitely the interaction between the character and their faith in some sort of way. Certainly struggles doing something interesting. I have a character who is not raised in the particular culture, observing it for the first time, and and he has questions. Now he doesn't answer. Doesn't ask the questions. But he's observing, and he has those questions in their internals. What does this all mean? And ultimately, he learns through his own. He doesn't ask questions, but he does learn. So it's definitely the interaction of the other characters with it. Does that make sense? Okay.
Can I add one more thing
Sure.
before I get the ball thrown at me? Larry Correa once said that the best thing you can do is entertain harder than you preach. If you start preaching harder than you entertain,
Yes.
you will. Okay. Plagiarism.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we're almost at lunch here. So I have to say that this panel in particular was the one that everybody for some reason wanted to be on, and I think it was. I said I realized I didn't have Patrick on any panels, and I said, let me know if you want to be on any of these panels. And I said the religion one is pretty full, but anything else? And he said he comes back with this short but well reasoned argument treatise for why. Let me make a case for why I should be on. So anyway, he was on the religion panel. And one more thing is one of the reasons that we're here, that BaseCon exists, is I was at a sci-fi convention in Minneapolis. I can't remember the name of it. One of those really big cons, and I went to a religion in sci-fi panel, and I believe there were 6 panelists, and they were all atheists. Every single one on the panel. And I believe we've got, 5 Catholics and a lapsed Catholic / Protestant?
Close enough.
Okay, something like you're close enough. Anyway,
I'm an honorary Catholic.
Honorary Catholic. So this is my revenge against that, I actually shortly into that panel somebody called Lord of the, and it was all just making fun of religion and sci-fi and just haha, it was so ridiculous, and somebody referred to the Lord of the Rings as Tolkien's racist fantasy, and I got up and walked out, and that was it. So